like I just recently took from one of my summer courses, Fundamentals of Everyday Beliefs. And so we kind of went in depth about what our beliefs are. And basically, like one running theme was that the fact that we even have these beliefs makes the Adventist Church one of the few churches that says exactly what we stand for and doesn't waver. And so I think as Adventists, we find it difficult to be open minded about movements like this because they embrace so many different kinds of people and different kinds of things that are just out, quote unquote, outside of the structure and rigidity of our beliefs. So, for example, one of our beliefs, I don't want to like misquote it, but basically it talks about like family and marriage and the family and what God's original ideal for man and stuff like that. And so like you said, if we were to support the Black Lives Matter movement, many people believe we would be supporting as well. Like Mpilo mentioned, the non-nuclear families and stuff like that. So I think that's where a lot of the contention or the uneasiness comes when people are like, I don't want to be outside of like what we know to be true because people find difficulty in that, and I understand it. Um, but I think it can also be dangerous because we walk a tightrope of being completely against people who need help because that's our mission is to show love at the end of the day and to be that's what a Christian is. That's what Jesus did when he was here. He fought for those who needed to be loved. So I think that's where we kind of have to find that balance.
Latasha, it's interesting you say that. I think people from YouTube also agree. The comment from YouTube says the church can support Black lives even if they don't like what the organization is supporting. So I agree with a lot of the sentiments you made. And Pilo, I know you raised your hand, but I kind of want to get Lauren's opinion on this as well. You've been a little bit quiet, so I want to know what are your thoughts on the comment that was made from this pastor and to the question I asked. And if you need me to repeat the question, just let me know.
I absolutely agree that the church can support Black lives without supporting the movement because the movement is more of just, bring people together to kind of embrace Black culture as well as like trying to like accept everyone else. So like embracing that Black Lives Matter, everyone matters, like it's less of like alienating Black people, but more of like kind of normalizing the acceptance we need. And I think it's important, like Christians, in general, we're seen as like loving people. We're seen as accepting people. So if we just embrace that, we do align with the right side of the Black Lives Matter movement, with the main part of the movement, which is just accepting everyone as equals. So I think when we embrace that in church and we embrace that wherever we go, like even in things we say and things we do, people can kind of feel that love radiating off of us. So I think just, we don't have to necessarily say, oh, I'm with the Black Lives Matter, hashtag Black Lives Matter movement, but just, expressing that you feel everyone should be accepted and seen as equal.
Right. And Pilo, I'm going to go to you before I move on to the next question.
Yeah. I think one of the issues we have is we believe that working with someone necessarily means endorsing that someone. No two people are going to agree on all the same things, right? So even if I work with you and endorse you, that doesn't mean my thoughts are 100% aligned with your thoughts. That's never going to be the case. And I think that works in the case of Black Lives Matter. One example that I think of that we see in the Bible is Paul when he is in the midst of a lot of different philosophers, I believe it was in Ephesus, and they have many different shrines to different gods. And there was one shrine that was to the quote, the unknown God. Now, the Bible doesn't tell us if the unknown God necessarily was Jehovah or some other God they considered the unknown God. But Paul was able to use that as an opportunity to engage with them and talk with them and introduce God to them. So here he didn't necessarily subscribe to all this polytheism that they were expressing, but he was able to work with them and engage in their religious discussion to introduce God to them. And I believe that's something that we can do as well, where Christ meets people where they are and uses that as an opportunity to engage with them and teach them more accurately, as the Bible says. So I think Adventists very much can engage with Black Lives Matter as it relates to the LGBTQ question. We can agree on the fact that everyone has an opportunity to express their humanity unabridged, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to engage on every single point. And I don't think we should be afraid of that. I think if we are too harsh and put a stone wall, it gives the wrong image, which is we're against everything, and that's not exactly the case.
And Pilo, wise words from a young man. Hats off to you, and I think we all can agree that you really just preach a sermon right there. So I kind of want to pivot the conversation a little bit, and Giovanni, I'm going to go to you, and then I'm going to go to Jake afterwards. So we're all Black on this panel, right? Stating the obvious. Some of us are from the DMV area. We're from New York. We're from Philly. Heavily Black concentrated areas, right? And I think in our own churches, we also have heavily Black concentrated churches as well. Um, and so, but I also think that when we go outside of our closed spaces, that's not necessarily the case, right? We do know that there's a large population of white people, and I'm not sure if everyone on this panel is Seventh-day Adventist, but there is also that large population of non-Black people. Especially the higher up you go in the church body, you realize like the higher ups don't necessarily look like we do, right? And also the church body has received criticisms after the killings of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, for not speaking out and for not making statements. Many of them have, but it was after the fact that they received backlash, and some felt as though they did not speak quick enough. So I kind of want to get a little bit personal here, and I want to ask you guys this question, and please feel free to answer honestly. This is a safe space. Do you feel as if, and God forbid, we don't want to speak this into existence, but do you feel as if someone was to happen to you, do you feel particularly supported by the church body? I'm going to go to Giovanni first, and then I'm going to go to Jake.
So if something were to happen to me, I feel as if the local churches that I've come in contact with, like along the East Coast, they would feel something. They would feel like a little bit of pain or something towards like my passing. But like as for the higher ups, like they haven't met me on a personal level, so they wouldn't know anything of me for real. They would just hear my name and just be like, "Oh, he's a part of the Seventh-day Church." So one of our members had passed, but they wouldn't really as a whole really understand or like feel anything for me.
Okay, that's honest. Jake, I want to go to you, and I want to get your opinion.
Yeah, so I think that same as him. I think my local church, like the people I've grown up with, like I've grown up in that church. I think they would feel for me, that have sympathy for me. They support me, just like as my pastor, he was talking about George Floyd in one of his sermons. I think that my church would support me for the global conference. I actually don't know, to be honest. Like I see that they don't say anything. Sometimes they don't say anything, and I don't know like whether they would say anything for me.
Okay, Toby, I'm kind of interested in hearing what you have to say.
Yeah, I personally feel like my church would support me. I feel like we've had conversations in our AOI time that is dedicated to talking about Black Lives Matter, showing that they do care about the issue and they care about what we think. So I personally feel like if something were to happen to me, then they would band together. They would protest, do all that. So, yeah.
Okay, great. That's great. I want to go to Jimmy, and then I'll go to Lauren.
I say that I'm part of two churches. So Sharon Temple is one that my father pastors at, and then Oakwood University Church, because that's my school's church. So I think both churches would, if something were to happen to me, would protest like Toby said, and be all over social media, like making a noise about it. But in terms of the global church, I'm highly doubtful Only because, like I said before, we're very afraid to seem like we're going against any kind of grain. So I feel like I don't I think that, like I said, local black churches, even maybe past like the churches that I attend, would because I have family around the world, type thing, that obviously I think that would be like people would respond in that regard. But I like I said before, I'm highly doubtful that the world church would be like, this young woman has lost her, we must do something. Like I really don't think we would see that.
Lauren?
I totally agree with what everyone has said in respect that the local churches probably would get up and protest and say something because at that point you really do feel the loss. So I think with this movement, a lot of like the backlash you can get is because people aren't sympathetic. So when you actually feel the loss, you have someone personal to you who you've lost because of the discrimination, racism, and things like that. You have to do something. You want to do something. You want to get justice for them. So that's why I feel like on a local level, you will get a lot of the support that you need. Like your family will get the support. Your church will like advocate for you. But on a global level, around the world, churches like on a higher up level, I don't think you would get as much support as you would expect, just for the fact that it's not really personal. But we do want to work towards that, having sympathy no matter what. But I think it's just the sympathy part that kind of plays into it.
Okay. I want to get Mpilo's opinion before I read one of the YouTube comments.
Yeah, I think a good way to synthesize what we've all been talking about is there needs to be a sense of family and community within our churches. I think we can all attest that maybe our local churches would be willing to take the heat for us in these situations. And I think it goes more beyond the fact that the color of our skin match. It's also because we've grown up in these churches, we've created families in these churches. I know for me, most of the people that I consider aunts and uncles are from my local church. And so I think the question is, how can we expand that family, that sense of family, not just within the local churches, but in the areas, the conferences, and into the world church at large? Now, obviously, there's a lot of issues there, cultural differences, physical distance. So it's something that we need to pray about and come up with new ways in which we can do that. But I think that's the real key there. How can we expand that sense of family beyond our local churches to a much larger area?
So you mentioned how do we expand that feeling and sense of family to the church at large, and I think this also speaks to the comment that we just got from YouTube, and it says, um, "The SDA church is not run by people that look like us. Maybe that's why the official church policy does not support Black Lives Matter." M. Williams, "The same as back in the '60s, we were told by the GC not to get involved in the civil rights movement." Pierre Elf, "The leaders of the SDA Church are fully in the spirit when they." I'm sorry. Pierre Elf says, "The leaders of the SDA Church are fully in the spirit when they would move past the fact that they don't have the same skin tone. They see what Jesus sees in us." Wow. I actually did not know it was advised by GC to not get involved in the civil rights movement. So that's pretty interesting. A little unfortunate. A little unfortunate because I think it kind of speaks to some people not seeing beyond their own circles and understanding that there's a bigger cause at hand. So
I'm sorry, may you read that last part again about the spirit?
sure. So Pierre Elf says the leaders of the SDA Church are fully in the spirit. If I'm reading right, yeah, the leaders of the SDA Church are fully in the spirit. Then they would move past the fact that though they don't have the same skin tone, they see what Jesus sees in us. Did you have a thought on that, Impilo?
I really just needed clarity so
Okay.
I can think about it a little bit more.
Okay. All right. So I kind of want to pivot the conversation a little bit to popular culture and media, right? And so I wanted to talk about the film Black is King. If many of you are not aware, Black is King is a visual album actually, that was created, directed, and produced by Beyonce. I think of it as a movie because the production was just that great. But she released this visual album, I believe it was last week or so. And the album was supposed to showcase African beauty, African art, African culture. And she did an interview recently on the news, and she talked about why she named the film Black is King. And in Beyonce's definition, Black is King refers to the fact that Black is regal, it stands for power, it stands for strength, it stands for beauty, all of the things that Black people have been able to maintain while being oppressed for thousands of years. However, not everyone has had the same views or has saw the vision that Beyonce had when filming this, right? So she's received quite a bit of backlash and criticisms from the Christian community, many of whom actually did not watch the film but took offense to the title in itself. So my question to you guys would be, have you seen the film Black is King? What are your thoughts on it, and how do you feel about the criticisms that the film got? Even if you just saw clips of the film, I know a lot of them were circulating on social media. I kind of just want to get your thoughts on it. And do you feel as though the film deserved the criticism that it got? Lauren, I'll go straight to you.
I'll say that I haven't watched the whole movie. I mean, visual album. I haven't watched the whole thing. I've seen clips of it on social media, Instagram, Snapchat. But most of the backlash I've seen like is focused around kind of the messages that we're seeing in the film. Like I saw like horn signs, things like that. That's where I saw more of the backlash. But the title in itself, I can see where people would kind of disagree with that. But most of the things I've like seen on social media have to do with like the symbols in Black is King, and I've seen the symbols.
Okay, thank you for your honest opinion. Giovanni, how about you? Have you seen any clips or anything surrounding Black is King?
I have not gotten around to watch it yet, but the backlash to it, I feel like if people haven't seen it, they shouldn't really try to criticize it yet. Like, you can't criticize a body of work without watching it or being able to experience it.
Okay, Jake, how about you?
Yeah, I agree with Lauren. I think that from the images, I haven't seen the movie, but from the images that I've seen, I've seen like the horns and stuff, and all the like the Illuminati symbols and stuff in there, like on YouTube. Not YouTube, Twitter, that people have pointed out, and I don't really watch no Beyonce, but I know from her music that she, it's known that that she was in the Illuminati. So yeah.
Jamae, I know you're an artist, right? And so I would think that you, out of all people, could appreciate a body of work like this because Beyonce paid specific homage to African artists. She used a lot of imagery and traditional African symbols as well. What were your thoughts? Did you see the movie? Did you see any clips? Have you heard any commentary surrounding the film?
I haven't seen it yet, but I have seen clips. And like you said, I have a deeper appreciation for the artistry. Beyonce's mind is, I mean, people can say whatever they want, but she is a very creative individual, and I respect her vision. So that, a lot of the critiques though, like when I was reading a couple articles, because I hadn't really gotten into it for real or like read or watched anything about it. But when I was reading about the critiques, a lot of people were like, well, Black is not king, Jesus is king, and stuff like that. And like this, people saying the film is demonic and stuff like that. And so when I was reading one article, basically, on in terms of the critiques from like Christians in general, not just the Seventh Day Adventist Church, about this film being demonic, I think people are more so demonizing African culture than anything else. And I mean, that has to do with white supremacy. So, colonialization, all that stuff. Black culture, African culture has been demonized for decades, eons, hundreds of years. So the fact that Beyonce went out and did this and was like, this is what African culture is. And obviously people can say like people who actually come from Africa, had their own critiques as well. But she showed the beauty of what Blackness is, what African culture is. And white people can't handle that. You know what I mean? And so, and especially white Christians, they're like, nah, we're not trying to see that. We're not trying to, you know what I mean? So they're obviously it's going to be demonized. And putting the coding of religion over it just makes it a little bit more palatable to what is the word I'm looking for? To make it seem like that what they're actually doing isn't what they're doing. You know what I mean? Or what they're saying.
Yes, Janae, great segue into my next question, actually, because I think about when even the Black Panther movie was released, and I think about Black is King. I think about the Black Lives Matter movement, and I see that immediately there was, after all of these things have been released, there was an uh, immediate response or backlash from the Christian community, right? And so you've touched on it, not a little bit, but a lot of it, about where this stems from, and it's possibly white supremacy. And so my question to you guys, because I do want to talk a little bit more about it, do you think the backlash that like the Black Panther movie Black is King and the Black Lives Matter movement has received, is that anti-blackness? And then Pilo, I kind of want to get your thoughts on this because I think you've definitely alluded to these things a little bit throughout our conversation. So I'll go to you first.
Okay, so to answer your specific question, as far as are criticisms of these films necessarily anti-black, it depends on who's making the criticism and what the nature of the criticism is. For example, when it comes to the Wakanda movie, or Black Panther, I have heard some criticisms from Africans specifically, that it could be considered what I like one word that someone put it called the Wakandification of Africa. In other words, to sort of conglomerate all the myriads of different African cultures into one and to have this fantastical interpretation of what Africa is. I have heard that. So, I mean, that's a whole separate discussion. But in terms of what I think we're getting to now, um, I have to agree with Janae on this and maybe build up a little bit that we do have an issue where culture and religion are too often intertwined. Right? I think of the Orthodox tradition. I know we're not Orthodox Christians, so obviously we're not going to align on every doctrinal issue. But if you look at the Orthodox tradition, which isn't the Catholic tradition, it's a different Christian denomination altogether, every country is allowed to express orthodoxy based on the cultural norms of that country. So if you go to Ethiopia, the orthodoxy is very much aligned with Ethiopian culture. If you go to Russia, if you go to Ukraine, if you go to Greece, right, the culture expressions of the religion are based on the culture of the people at that time. Another issue that I think we're dealing with is language barrier. I was listening to a professor by the name of Jane Small, who was looking at the term voodoo, for example, and we know that tends to be a taboo when we talk about African spirituality. But I learned that the term actually is only specific to a few different languages in West Africa. And it really just refers to the essence of God, right? And so it refers to the relationship that the people had with God in the different elements of life. You know, being able to identify God in nature, being able to identify God with each other. And we have evidence of God sanctifying essentially this expression of relationship in Romans chapter 1, where God says, I gave my word to the people of Israel. But frankly, everyone in the world has had an opportunity to come to know God through things such as nature, through things such as the relationship with each other. So we do recognize that God can manifest himself in different cultures. But unfortunately, because we've gotten so bottled up into one cultural expression of Christianity, of our relationship with God, it can often distort who God is and how people can relate with him.
I want to thank you for ending on that, Impilo, and I kind of want to hear from Toby. I'm going to ask you a question and tailor it a little bit, Toby. But based on some of the things that we've heard from Impilo and Janae about this kind of clash between cultural expression and religion, I want to ask you this question, right? Do you often feel the need to choose between your blackness and your Christianity? I know that's a deep question, but I think based on the points that have been brought up, I think it's an important question to ask.
So the question is like, do I feel like, is there like a tension between like my blackness and Christianity?
So I think we know there's a tension between the two,
Right.
I guess my question would be to you: does this tension often make you feel as though you have to choose between one or the other, your Blackness or your Christianity?
Sometimes I do. Cause like for me, like I remember, cause I'm part of this Bible study group at my school, and I remember like we're doing this thing where like this series called Healing like Racial Trauma, and every single time I referred to myself as like a Black Christian, and like sometimes like I remember like reading or like seeing somewhere that before you're Black, you're Christian first, right? And before I used to well, I still think about this still. I'm like, I'm Black, but I'm also Christian. But does the order like really matter? So like sometimes I really have to think about it. Like, am I putting like my Blackness before my Christianity? But I don't really necessarily think that's the case. But I feel like that's still something that I'm still trying to explore and learn more about. But I'm interested in what everyone else thinks about that, because I feel like that's something I'm still personally struggling with.
Okay.
So I'd like to hear other people's take on that.
Does anyone want to answer that before we read a comment from YouTube? Anyone at all? Okay. Oh, Impilo, you can go.
Yeah, I personally do agree with the statement that you are Christian before you are Black, right? The Bible says that when we get to heaven, we don't know what we're going to be looking like, but we just know we're going to be like God, right? So ultimately, it's not even about what I look like right now. I'm going to be a completely different person when I get to heaven. That's the main goal. But then the Bible also says that we are fearfully and wonderfully made, right? And God has essentially made us in his image. So to hate ourselves and to speak negatively about who God has made us is to deny the fact that God has made us fearfully and wonderfully made, and to deny the fact that God's image is expressed in ourselves, right? And so, in other words, while we're focused on being Christian, we can't completely express our Christianity without a love for self. God says, love others as you love yourself. So the two go hand in hand, but I guess the issue comes in, maybe we shouldn't get so caught up in the politics of Blackness that we lose sight on our objective, which is Christianity and becoming like Christ.
Okay. That's definitely a fair answer. I'm gonna read this question from YouTube before I go to our last question, and then after our last question, I want to address some of the questions we've been getting from our YouTube comments. So Robert Harris asks, is it possible for there to be an intentional honor of Black art and culture while there's still potential non-Christian messages? I really do want to hear Jemai's opinion on this question, but before I go to her, I kind of want to get Jake's thought about this, because Jake, you mentioned like the whole like Illuminati thing with Beyonce, and sometimes we see these weird messages in music videos. So, do you want to take a spin at answering that question?
Yeah, okay. So, Black art, you can appreciate people's art and stuff like that, but when it comes to you seeing images that are against your Christianity, your religion, you can say, oh, that's not okay, So this isn't like, for example, for the Black is King, like, you can agree with what she's saying, oh, Black people are powerful, etc. But when you see stuff in those videos, like, for example, the horns or whatever, you can disagree and stuff like that. So it doesn't really, to me, I think that you can appreciate Black people's art while still maintaining and believing in staying strong in what you believe in.
Okay, thank you. Before we address the YouTube comments, we'll end on Jemai.
I agree with what Jake said. I think it's like an individual thing in a way, because whatever you have decided you are going to stand for and value in terms of your Christian walk, and your relationship with God, that will determine how you view anything. And Black art is included, I think. And so I think the question, I'm still trying to figure out like how I'm trying to understand it. But while there is still potential non-Christian messages, I think yes, there's always potential for non-Christian messages to be in anything because sin permeates the world. But like I said, it's more dependent on how the individual has decided they're going to filter that through what they value, how their relationship with God, stuff like that. So I think it's kind of difficult because you want to have a foundation and you want to be like, I'm not going to waver on this, but at the same time, you want to give yourself space to appreciate things. So I think again, it comes down to the individual and what they decide.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you for that. So we do have a few minutes left to our panelists. I want to thank you guys so far for sticking in there, giving such great, insightful responses to some of these questions. I know it hasn't been easy, but so far you've managed the conversation very well. So we do have a question from YouTube comments, and it's a little bit personal, but feel free to be honest. Have any of you ever experienced racism? How have you handled it? And how should Christians respond when they're personally discriminated against? I kind of want to start with Lauren on this question.
Okay, so have I experienced racism? I've experienced like prejudice, but I don't know if I should speak on it. I was younger. So I was in elementary school and I remember I was playing with my dolls and I had a friend and not all of my friends were black and I had one of my friends, I remember. And I remember I was playing with my dolls one day at recess and she came up to me, she was like, "Can I play with you?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." So she took my dolls. She just took my dolls, right? And I was like, "Why would you take my dolls? I want to play with you." And she was like, "You know, my mom told me I'm not allowed to play with people who are black." And I was like, I didn't know how to deal with it, right? So I was young and I went back to my mom and I was like, "Mom, why was she telling me this?" She was like, my mom gave me advice. So she was like, "Don't do anything wrong. Don't do anything you regret. Don't fight her. Don't say mean things to her, but rather just be nice to her because then she really won't have a reason to like be mean to you." And you know, she did bring it up with the school. We did like go over things in school like regarding that issue. But since then, I kind of knew to like when I experienced situations like that, you don't necessarily want to like be violent. You don't want to say things you don't mean. You don't want to kind of be the bad person even though they started it, right? So I think um your question about how Christians should like deal with racism or prejudice and things like that, I think just, you know, being the loving person because God says to love your enemies, right? So you should just, I don't know, love your enemies, pray for them, you know, don't be the person that you kind of wouldn't want. I mean, like treat others the way you want to be treated. So I think in that respect, we could, I mean, we use the Bible for things like that. Obviously, you might have like a little, like, you might like itch a little hearing things like that. And like you want to like backlash, you know, kind of like fight and things like that. But I think just be mature about it, be respectful, don't
Okay,
do anything crazy, if that makes sense.
thank you. Giovanni, as a young black man in America, have you experienced racism? And what is your opinion? How do you think Christians should respond to racist encounters?
So an experience that I've had, I had to go to this agriculture um conference basically, and it was in DC. So me and my group, we were kind of late for the classes because you know how they say if you're 5 minutes early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late, and if you're late, oh well. So we're young, so we didn't really understand that yet. So we ended up getting to all the classes late, but we would know that like the set time for like everything else would be straight. So we ended up making it to lunch on time because it was just like a regular thing. Like they would be like, it's 5 minutes between each session, and then you go to lunch. So we ended up going to lunch, and there's an elderly white man in front of us, and he says they're always late for class, but they're always on time for lunch. And me and my group, we would like we heard it and we were just like shocked, but none of us wanted to act out of turn because like it's a conference and we don't want to like make a scene because we're a group of young black, which called men and women. We just didn't want to like cause a giant scene in the place, so we just let it roll off our back and we just let it let it be. So I think that's how Christians, as Black Christians, we should handle things of that
Okay,
nature.
thank you. So we do have 8 minutes left, and I kind of want to end on something that I think is important for today's time. But my question is to you: why? I mean, sorry, not why, but what are you doing personally to stay sane during these times of civil unrest? And what is your recommendation to young people just like you? You know, we're witnessing a social revolution that's going on, and while it's necessary, it cannot be easy to not only have to deal with a global pandemic, but having to see your Black brothers and sisters be killed by the state and oftentimes see their murderers go without any consequences. So, what is your suggestion as to how we as young people can stay sane during these times of civil unrest? Because we have so little time left, please do try and keep your answers to a minute or less, and I'll start with Lauren.
Um, just keeping my answer short, I think it goes into like educating yourself, whether it's reading the Bible, researching, and encouraging others to do the same, because a lot of these issues come from like ignorance. So I'd say just encourage others to educate themselves.
Absolutely. Okay, Jermaine?
I'd say being honest about how you feel, like actually acknowledging it instead of not shoving it down, because then it just surfaces negatively, and writing things down.
Toby?
Yeah, so I was just thinking about it. So I feel like sometimes like us as youth, like we need to turn off social media because a lot of times I feel like we can internalize like all these like like racist things and then start to like actually believe like the stereotypes about like the stereotypes that racists are saying about us. So I feel like if we take the time to turn it off and like really like educate ourselves and really like understand our God-given abilities and talents and utilize them in order to build up Black people and Black youth in the community so we can show that we are not what you're saying we are, and it's really showing like the glory and the beauty of God that way.
Jake?
Yeah, so we are living through a lot of social, injustice and whatever. I think it's important to remember and to, act on what we say. So, Black Lives Matter. Let's go out there and go vote and, or go donate to such and such cause or the George Floyd cause or whatever, just to make sure that we're just not just only saying this stuff, and we're actually doing and acting on what we believe in.
Absolutely. Giovanni?
I feel like a good way to like move through this troubling time is to, always pray on the situation and to surround yourself with strong other strong Black youth in your area.
And lastly, Impilo.
Yeah, there's a quote that I like. Some of you might know it. It says, Lord, give me the wisdom to change the things that I have the ability to change, right? But give me the strength to deal with the things that I have no control over. In other words, don't allow yourself to get so caught up and so stressed out about things that you can't do anything about. Allow yourself to distract yourself with things that you like, hobbies, other activities, schoolwork, right? Because life goes on. But at the same time, find avenues, as so many other panelists have suggested, to get involved. If you want to post something, bring attention to so many different issues, go ahead and post it. If there's a protest happening in your area, go ahead and attend. If you can organize a protest with your friends in your school, go ahead and do it, right? There's so many different causes that you can get involved in that are doing the work right now. Just a simple Google search can allow you to channel that energy into actual change and to progressing the movements forward. So find avenues to engage, but in those moments where you can engage, if a politician is doing something and voting is 5 months from now, distract yourself with something else that you actually can do something about.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much for your responses, such amazing responses in a time like this. So I kind of want to leave us with this scripture because I think there's been questions surrounding what does the Bible say about social justice and what we should do to fight for Black lives, right? And so one of my favorite texts is Proverbs 31:8-9, and it says, "Open your mouth for the mute, for the rights of all who are destitute. Open your mouth, judge righteously, defend the rights of the poor and the needy." And so that tells you right there that the Bible speaks about fighting for the oppressed people and that we should not stay silent on these issues. Once again, you guys, I want to thank you so much for joining me for this conversation. This was such an important conversation, and you as young people, it's good to know that you guys are being active in your own churches. That's why you've been recommended to sit on this panel for today. But I want to let you guys know this won't be the last time that we have this discussion. Um, and so, yeah, thank you guys so much. Um, also, I attend Metropolitan SDA, and I'm a part of a group. It's called F.L.O.W. They are actually having a show today at 4:30, and they're going to discuss love and money. The channel is at F.L.O.W Presents, so if you are able to watch, please do go and support them. But thank you once again, and we have Latasha who will make our last announcement.
First of all, and I'm sure Pastor Graham will join me in this, we are so proud of this panel this afternoon. It was great to listen to the dialogue, and you all will be able to catch up with all the commentary in the chats from YouTube and Facebook. We appreciate that as well. The dialogue there is great. It really shows us that this is a conversation that we do need to have more of. And so we're going to create more platforms to do that. So we appreciate you guys, coming out of the gate and putting a nice standard in place as we go forward with more of these youth panels. So we just want to thank you for that. What do you think, Pastor Graham? We need to do more of these?
Yeah, I can't pay them, but they were listen. I listened to it, and it's better than what I thought it was going to be. You guys are brilliant. You guys are and the scope of all of you. It's one Richmond, and we down in New Jersey. I just thought it was just absolutely great. I learned a lot from it, also, especially. I learned a lot of what you're thinking, because there were many times that you were saying certain things and I was like, well, I don't think that way. Okay, it's not about what I think. It's about what you think. And I thought it was great. And I'm glad that Ms. Latasha is setting up more throughout the month that's coming, because I think that it absolutely opens us up to have the dialogue that we need to have. Let's start now, so that as we go through the rest of the year, we know that you all have been the ones who broke the grounds to allow us to open up for other young people to hear what they have to say. I thought it was just absolutely awesome. Thank you a lot. Thank you. It was great.
Yeah, and we don't want to keep everyone long, but we do want to let you know that we have some other things coming up in the month of August. And I just want to give credit to Lauren and Jake. Lauren and Jake have been working with me this summer, and we talked about some of the things that we wanted to do to bring the youth voice out. So this panel was their brainchild, but they also had some other ideas. One of them is to do a youth showcase, art showcase. And we're not just talking about singing, although singing is encouraged. I'm just going to put this up here so everyone can see. For the month of August, of course, today we had our panel discussion. Next week, we're going to have a youth showcase for ages 2 to 12. Following week, we're going to talk about what our youth are doing through this COVID struggle, because we all know it's real. And then we're going to have another showcase for ages 13 to 21, August the 29th. And so, Lauren, you want to tell people what we're looking for this showcase? What's the purpose of this showcase for our young people?
So this showcase is basically to uplift the youth, and like we've been doing with these panel discussions and to bring people from around the conference, we just want to kind of embrace the youth and the talents that we were all gifted with from God. So for example, Jake and I back at our church, we play music and we lead a praise team, and those are some the kind of things that we want to share with the rest of the conference. So in the showcase, we'd have art, and you know how art is very broad. So it could be music, it could be paintings, drawings, literally anything you see on the screen here. But we just basically want to embrace this and share it with others. And I think it's a good way to bring all the youth together as well, and allow us to make new friends around the conference.
Absolutely. Thank you. We realize even from this panel that we have a lot of gifted young people out there, and they don't always have a platform to show what they can do, especially now with us being in our homes mostly. So if you have a young person that wants to be showcased, please reach out to me, Hewitt at aecsda.com. We really want to highlight them. And we also have some things coming up from the youth department. We want to shout those out real quick. Pastor Graham, can you share what's going on tomorrow?
Well, for the Pathfinder organization, we have trees tomorrow at 6:00. And that will be, our Pathfinder honors. It's going to be great. I'm going to be teaching. Nobody else is going to be teaching. I'll teach that, especially for the summer. So we'll have fun doing that. And then
That's 3:00, right?
It's going to be at 3:00. Yeah, and you can sign up on our website. You'll see it at aecycm.com. We also have guardrails for parents. That's coming every two Sundays, I should say, right? And that's going to be at 6:00. You see the dates as there: August, September, October, November, December. How do we say it? Bi-weekly, right? That's when it's going to be.
That's it.
And this one coming up is we're going to be talking about technology and your children. So this is more for the parents, not really for the kids. We're more telling on the kids, on the young people. So
telling all their secrets, all the tricks of the trade.
Yeah, most of them. So we have quite a few things coming up. Wednesday night coming up, we also have a 30-minute prayer service for our young people. So we're going to try to keep everybody busy in this virtual thing. And if any one of you have ideas about what we can do, please just let us know. We'll be more than happy to go ahead and help with that. Our minds, we might have a little bit of wisdom, but you guys got the strength and the mind frame. So just let us know and we'll run with it.
All right, great. That's a little rundown of other things coming up. We just want once again to thank this awesome panel. You guys did a wonderful job. You made us so proud, and I know those who are watching are proud of you as well. Thank you so much. We appreciate your voices today. All right, everyone, we're going to sign off. We thank those who joined us viewing on Facebook and YouTube. Continue to stay connected to us so you can see all the other things we have coming up for our youth and others. So we're signing off. Let's give them away.